Tansei, I'm Chris Sanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. From BC to Ontario, fires in the north continue to burn across the country. A local state of emergency remains in effect in the town of Lytton, British Columbia this week due to a nearby wildfire. And we're now learning that fire was sparked by an RCMP equipment failure.
Hopefully everything's okay with the wind. The one I'm worried about now is the Eisman Creek wildfire.
That wildfire, which is burning north of the town, has grown to 130 hectares and is still out of control. 3 helicopters are tackling that fire, which was ignited when a wheel ejected from an RCMP trailer into a nearby ditch. The RCMP says the officer driving the trailer tried to extinguish the flames, but was not able, and now the fire has spread. The second fire is holding at just under 6 hectares and is not expected to grow. But all of this is coming on the anniversary of the deadly wildfire that destroyed much of the village of Lytton 4 years ago that killed 2 people. Meanwhile, in northern Saskatchewan, lightning strikes have ignited a number of new wildfires, with one of them, the South Bay Fire, causing serious concerns in the community of Beauval. 64 wildfires are currently burning across Saskatchewan. As of Thursday morning, 21 are listed as not contained. The Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency says the storms that brought in cooler weather also led to thousands of lightning strikes, sparking new fires. So far, 185 people have been forced from their homes in Bear Creek Resort and La Plonge First Nation. The community of Beauval has declared a state of emergency and has now started voluntary evacuations. And in Lynn Lake, Manitoba, a mandatory evacuation order begins today. The town says wildfires are threatening some hydro lines and highways, which could make travel more complicated. Water treatment and emergency services will also be impacted by this evacuation. People have been told to get out and head to Brandon. That's about 10 hours south from Lynn Lake. So far, there are now 60 wildfires burning in Manitoba, with 17 out of control. A college graduate is speaking out after the American Sign Language interpreter she relied on was asked to leave the stage at an event held by the Manitoba government last week. She says the Minister for Accessibility is not meeting expectations when it comes to deaf and hard of hearing Manitobans. Here's APTN's Sav Jonesa with more.
30 years after graduating high school and proudly raising 6 children, Deborah Offshar now has a college certificate in child and youth care. She found a trauma-informed program that instilled pride in her as an Indigenous woman who grew up in foster care. It was also accessible as a deaf person who speaks American Sign Language, or ASL.
So many people who are not deaf or hard of hearing, they don't understand what we're going through. They don't understand our day-to-day life.
Supported by her daughter Stephanie, who is also deaf, Offshar recently celebrated her hard work at a graduation ceremony for Indigenous women. It was put on by the Manitoba government and hosted by the province's Minister for Gender Equality, Nahani Fontaine.
At first it was beautiful. It was a lovely event. We arrived. It was colorful. It felt joyful.
But things turned sour only seconds after Fontaine's speech finished. They say Fontaine, who is also the Minister for Accessibility, told the ASL English interpreter they relied on to leave the stage.
It felt completely in contradiction to what she had just said, right? We were inspired, we were watching, she had this beautiful speech, and then you could tell when she walked and was talking to the interpreter, we didn't know what she was saying, but the vibe clearly changed, right? And then the interpreter moved in and was like, oh, okay. So this is an event to celebrate the people who can hear, not us, right? Where are they?
Immediately after, in front of reporters and cameras, Fontaine told her press secretary about her frustrations with the interpreter.
It was okay, I was thrown off, it wasn't great, but because the woman, she shouldn't have been on the stage, I couldn't see anybody on the stage, and all I could see her was her... Yeah, so I'm like, why did I have her on the stage? Jesus, I'm like, you need to relax.
Afshar tells APTN National News that when she first saw the video, her heart sank.
I opened it and I saw, and my jaw just dropped. The emotions just came from everywhere. I was angry, pissed off, and at the same time I was trying to remain calm and control myself and think my way through that. I didn't know what to do.
Afshar says those comments hurt even more because she had to organize for an interpreter to even be present at the event after repeatedly asking the government to hire one weeks before and receiving no response. Red River College ended up providing the interpreter's service so ASL speakers could be fully included in the celebration.
Indigenous people, we face racism, discrimination, barriers every day. Deaf people experience autism and discrimination every day. Being both, you have more discrimination, and as a woman as well. And so there's just this intersectionality and these layers of these various experiences.
Amidst backlash, Fontaine issued public and private apologies to those affected. Afshar says the emailed apology from Fontaine's office fell short and hopes Fontaine apologizes in person with an ASL interpreter present.
So that's not what I'm looking to do. What I want is learning. A mistake has been made, but can you really make the effort to learn from this? To learn about who we are, to learn from our community, from us as people and as Manitobans.
She believes a minister for accessibility should have a lived experience with a disability to understand how accessibility barriers may affect others. Going forward, Afshar hopes the Manitoba government invests in hiring an on-staff ASL interpreter so deaf and hard-of-hearing Manitobans are no longer an afterthought. Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Many First Nations communities in Quebec have been hosting protests to denounce Bill 97. It aims to modernize the province's forestry regime, but many First Nations are against this legislation. Some communities have set up blockades on roads that logging trucks use and sent eviction notices to the logging companies. In Montreal, multiple protests have been held to denounce this bill. Inuk activist Emily Fleming Dubuque has organized 3 protests, with a 4th one set to be hosted in Quebec's capital later this month. It's a response to Quebec's forestry minister inviting First Nations to co-write the bill with her ministry. Fleming Dubuque says First Nations shouldn't just be invited to co-write, but should instead be the ones writing these bills.
On organise une manifestation le 19 juillet. Ça va être au Parlement. Nous allons communiquer les infos sur nos plateformes, tout simplement parce que y a plusieurs personnes qui veulent se joindre à nos mobilisations, mais on se rend compte que c'est non seulement à Montréal, mais plusieurs nous ont demandé de se rassembler à Québec. On a plusieurs organismes aussi qui veulent se joindre à la cause et nous offrir leur aide parce que ce projet de loi, c'est un projet de loi qui va toucher l'ensemble des Québécois et Québécoises. C'est pas seulement les Premières Nations, les Autochtones, mais c'est un projet de loi qui touche l'ensemble des Québécois et Québécoises.
A new report from the U.S. says barely any of the fentanyl seized south of the border originates from Canada, despite numerous statements from U.S. President Donald Trump saying otherwise. The study was conducted by the U.S. think tank the Manhattan Institute. It examined thousands of large-scale fentanyl seizures across 80 U.S. counties along the Canadian and Mexican borders. They found that by weight, about 99% of fentanyl pills capsules gathered in large seizures between 2013 and 2024 were discovered in the U.S.-Mexico border counties. The report adds large Canadian border seizures were relatively rare. A caribou in Nunov has tested positive for rabies. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. A caribou in the Nunov community of Coral Harbour tested positive for rabies in early April. At the time, Nunavut's Department of Health said it is rare for caribou to get rabies, and thankfully a further outbreak has not been reported since. With Coral Harbour neighbouring Nunavut in northern Quebec, APTN News spoke with Marianne Gagne. Gagne is a biologist and provincial coordinator for rabies for Quebec's Ministry of Environment, Climate Change, Wildlife and Parks. She spoke out about concerns of rabies spreading to wildlife in Nunavut. She says Nunavut is already dealing with foxes being infected with rabies. Gagne says there is an ongoing issue of rabies in foxes in the northern region, which can be transmitted to other animals, even humans. She says the best course of action to address rabies is prevention.
Because usually, like foxes, they don't come close to community when there's dogs outside and all that. If they're vaccinated, they're going to protect the community as well as protect the families and all that, because they won't be able to transmit the virus, because dog can contract rabies from an infected fox and after could be transmitting it to human as well. So vaccinating dogs and staying away from wildlife, and if you have to manipulate because you're hunting or you're trapping, just make sure you wear gloves. And if there's any chances of, splattering some liquid like fluid in your face, you can even wear glasses or wear a mask. So those are all ways to protect yourself against rabies.
It's just been over a year since Victoria Gold's Eagle Mine disaster near Mayo, Yukon, which resulted in hundreds of millions of liters of cyanide solution to be released into the surrounding environment. Now, a new report is shining a light on the causes behind the incident. As APTN Sarah Connors tells us, the chief of the First Nation at the heart of the incident feels there's still more questions than answers.
According to an independent review board tasked with looking into the incident, multiple factors led to last year's Eagle Gold Mine disaster. In a report released Wednesday, the board found an area of the mine's heap leach facility had too steep of a slope and a history of poor drainage. That, in combination with what the report calls adverse conditions and events, such as inadequate management of the mine's ore quality, triggered the failure. The review board also found Victoria Gold and its third-party contractors had a hand in the incident through their actions or inactions.
We can't trust the land anymore like we've been taught to.
At the heart of the disaster is the First Nation of Nacho-Nayakdun, whose traditional territory the mine is on. Chief Donna Hope isn't surprised by the report's findings.
The heap was compromised by recklessness and lack safety culture at all stages, and that's how the catastrophic landslide was the result.
She also feels the report only scratches the surface of the failure and that the territorial government needs to hold a public inquiry to better understand what went wrong.
We need accountability. We need to know the role Yukon government in permitting or failing to prevent increasingly dangerous conditions at mine sites like that.
The report provides recommendations to prevent future incidents, such as changes to industry practices in the regulatory process. Mines Minister John Stryker says the government is reviewing the report's findings and will determine the appropriate next steps for a public inquiry. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
And that mine was placed into a court-ordered receivership last year and is now up for sale. On this week's new In Focus podcast, our host Sierra Bettens is joined by our Parliament Hill reporter Karen Pugliese to continue the Bill C-5 discussion, which became law on June 26th. The legislation promises to remove interprovincial trade barriers and fast-track natural resource projects deemed to be in the, quote, national interest. Here's a preview of that discussion.
I've been seeing actually what I would call like a lot of restraint on the part of leaders. They've spoken out and they've held their press conference and they fired their warning shots, and they did hold a small protest here in Ottawa, and they've warned the government that something like idle no more could occur again. And so they've said all those things, but they're so willing to just go back to the table and work this out. Like, all they want is a proper consultation and reassurances that the rights are going to be expected.
We now want to tell you about this week's new web poll questions. Our first question we asked: do you think Canadian honours from the Crown should be refused by those advocating for Indigenous rights? Your answers are yes, no, or unsure. Our second question is: Will a summit with the Prime Minister lead to change in how Indigenous rights are respected in One Canadian Economy Act? You can answer yes, no, or unsure. Go to our website at aptnnews.ca/polls to have your say. We will post the results early next week. Our APTN Yellowknife video journalist Bruce Dela Cruz is back from holidays and gives us the latest on what he's working on this week.
Hi there. Youth aged 11 to 16 from the Northwest Territories went on a week-long canoe trip on the Decho River, organized by Northern Youth Leadership, a nonprofit based in Yellowknife. Partnering with institutions such as NASA, the youth learned environmental practices, culture, and leadership in fun, hands-on activities. Stay tuned for that story.
Thanks for staying with us. Fredericton 21 and sunny there, Halifax 20. The Grand River 20, Nain 18 and partly cloudy. Saguenay 17, Quebec City rain and 17. 24 in Toronto, Peterborough 23. Thunder Bay 14, Wawa 21 and partly cloudy. 10 in Churchill, sunny in Thompson at 24. 22 in Winnipeg, Barons River 24. 19 in Regina, Saskatoon 18. 16 in Meadow Lake, Stony Rapids 14. 24 in Fort McMurray, high level 24 as well. 31 in Medicine Hat and sunny there, Lethbridge 29. 33 in Penticton, Vancouver 25 and sunny. 25 in Fort Nelson, Dees Lake, rain and 19. Old Crow 16, Dawson 20. 24 in Fort Simpson, Yellowknife 22. 18 in Fort McPherson, Colville Lake 18. 17 in Whale Cove, Arviat 19. And Arctic Bay 6, Aglulik, rain and 7. Our next guest is vying to become this year's Miss Indigenous Canada. 24-year-old Gina Bombard is from the Saugeen First Nation and calls Winnipeg home. They are a proud Two-Spirit Anishinaabe and a direct descendant of Chief Kake Kanapes, who signed Treaty 1 in 1871. Gina is also a member of a ceremonial family with ties across Turtle Island, and she is also a professional makeup artist with experience with Sephora Canada and former Miss Southern Manitoba and a contestant in Miss World Canada. They are also a strong voice for LGBTQIA2S+ youth. We recently spoke with Gina. Here's that interview. Gina Bombard, thank you for being here. Can you tell us why you wanted to run for this year's Miss Indigenous Canada?
Yes, thank you for having me today. So for the Miss Indigenous Canada pageant, I have never known there to be an openly Indigenous and Two-Spirit pageant queen before, outside of drag queens or specifically Two-Spirit pageants. So this is a new space for me and I'm really proud to be a part of it.
That's awesome. And you previously ran for Miss Southern Manitoba World and Miss World Canada. These competitions are nothing new to you. Can you explain what you learned from those competitions and what you can bring to this one?
Yes, absolutely. So I actually held the title of Miss Southern Manitoba World in 2018, and that was a really great experience. And then I competed at Miss World Canada. And the greatest thing that I took out of those was the sisterhood and the empowerment between all of the women. At the time, there was many of us from different cultural backgrounds, so that was a really beautiful experience. And so I hope to bring in the same sense of sisterhood into this pageant as well.
You also have a really interesting background with relations to your family name and your family. Tell us about that.
Yes, so my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Kakikapanes. The English translation to that is forever bird, and he was the first chief of Saugeen, and he signed Treaty 1 on behalf of our people in 1871. And so my Mishum is a direct descendant of Kakikapanes, and it's a fact that my family is very proud of, and I carry that spirit of leadership that he held in everything that I do.
How important is also your culture and being who you are in terms of your Indigenous identity, putting that out there?
Yes, it's at the forefront of my identity for sure. I was raised in my culture and in ceremony, and so those are teachings that I always carry with me no matter where I go. And I'm just so proud to be part of the first pageant to be led by Indigenous youth that's rooted in cultural pride.
You're also a strong voice for the Two-Spirit community. Do you think we need more voices out there in the community, especially now with regards to what's happening down in the United States?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important for our First Nations communities to educate themselves on the history of Two-Spirit people and the roles that they had in our communities prior to colonization. They held important roles in leadership. They were healers, they were medicine people, and I really hope to encourage other communities to bring that back. And it's also important for allies to step up and use their voice in support of our Two-Spirit relatives, especially our youth.
And if you were chosen to be Miss Indigenous Canada this year, what would you do with the title?
There is a lot of things that I would love to do with the title of Miss Indigenous Canada 2025, but my main goal is to visit as many First Nations communities as I can to not only educate myself, but share the diversity of our cultures, our languages, our traditions, and also I hope to do some research on the various ways that we honored Two-Spirited people in our communities across Turtle Island.
You also are a makeup artist by trade. What's that like, and what's it like for you? Do you try to push your Indigenous culture or who you are in that field as well?
Yes, absolutely. I have experience working at Sephora Canada, and I've also freelanced as a makeup artist, and I've always liked to sometimes match my eyeshadow to my beadwork or my jewelry. And it's always been a source of creativity for me, and it's convenient to do a pageant and to be a makeup artist myself. It's just something that I love to do.
Finally, Gina, what is your message to our Indigenous youth out there who have big dreams and they want to do something with their life? And what is your message to them? You know, you went to become a makeup artist, you've taken part in these competitions. What is your message to them?
My message would be is that the fear will always be there, but it's important that we sometimes can take it head on and go for our dreams anyway. And there will always be a community to support you. It might not feel like it sometimes, but just know that when you stay true to yourself, your people will find you.
Gina, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Miigwech for having me.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday. Dennis Ward is back in a few hours with your evening newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, miigwech masicho kwana. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Ekse.